The press secretary echoing the president's Truth Social post this morning, saying that a potential nuclear deal between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia would require the Saudis to join the Abraham Accords and normalize relations with Israel. The press secretary also saying that potential deal would not allow the Saudis to enrich uranium if it moves forward. The Israeli prime minister's office appearing to agree with the Trump administration, posting moments ago, quote, Saudi Arabia's joining of the Abraham Accords would be a historic leap forward for peace in the Middle East. I want to bring in White House correspondent Monica Alba, who's been standing by and taking a listen to this press briefing alongside all of us. I want to start first with this Saudi deal, Monica, because I think that there is some confusion about when this contingency first came to fruition. Yes, the president had talked about the potential, the possibility of Saudi Arabia joining on to the Abraham Accords and normalizing relations with Israel, but that was long before the wars, essentially, between Israel and Gaza and Israel, United States with Iran. And now, when this nuclear deal was announced yesterday between the U.S. and Saudi, there was no talk of Saudi joining the Abraham Accords. In fact, it seemed quite obvious that they would not be joining on to normalize relations with Israel, considering Israel's role so far in the wars I just mentioned. So what do we know about this latest update, this news coming out of the White House now, that this is now contingent on them joining the Abraham Accords? Do we know if there's conversations that have been had between MBS and the president, for instance?
Yeah, I mean, this is now a really important part of this story, Yasmin. Yesterday, when this was rolled out by the Department of Energy and the Trump administration, there were questions about some of the specifics of the deal, but nowhere in all of the information, the press release, the announcements that came out, was there any mention of this precondition that now the White House and the press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, is saying is required for this deal to go forward? And when she was asked very specifically by our own colleague, Gabe Gutierrez, and others, where this came from and why this wasn't a part of the announcement yesterday, the press secretary said simply this was the president's idea this morning, that it is an idea he's been talking about and pursuing since his first term, but specifically linking it to this agreement between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia for this nuclear deal is something that he posted on his social media platform today and is now attaching in this more urgent and serious way. You brought up the question of conversations with Saudi Arabia, with the Crown Prince, MBS. The press secretary said that in the time since the president posted that about the Abraham Accords and now, she wasn't aware of any conversations, but it is likely that maybe there will be conversations, if not between the two leaders, between lower ranking officials, because this does now throw this into question and raises all sorts of issues about why the White House and the Trump administration would roll out this deal only for it to be derailed by the president's own attachment to this today. But I have to tell you, Yasmin, that it's not the first time that we've seen that. Remember that the president has also tried to link the Abraham Accords as a precondition to other deals. He wanted different countries in the Middle East to sign on to the Abraham Accords as part of the Memorandum of Understanding, that tentative initial peace deal between the U.S. and Iran. Some weeks ago, they did not agree to that. That did go forward. Of course, now the MOU is pretty much irrelevant given the resumption of hostilities between the U.S. and Iran. But that just shows you that these are things that sometimes the president introduces and then seem to fade away. We will see whether that's the case with this situation. But the other important element to this, of course, is Israel and that statement you read by the prime minister. And we do wonder whether Prime Minister Netanyahu, who may be traveling here in the coming days for Lindsey Graham's funeral, whether he may have a meeting with President Trump or at least a conversation. He certainly wants to see Saudi Arabia potentially join the Abraham Accords. But again, there's been no comment from Saudi Arabia saying whether they are willing to do that or not. In fact, in the past, they have not been willing to do so. So it does set up an important dynamic here for sure, Yasmin.
I'm just wondering if we have any reporting to indicate, and I know the president and Prime Minister Netanyahu talk pretty frequently, sometimes off the cuff, picking up the phone and speaking with one another amidst this ongoing conflict in the Middle East. But I'm wondering if they have had a conversation since the announcement of this Saudi deal, considering kind of the timing of the social media post from the president, along with the statement released just an hour or so ago by the prime minister. Do we know if they've had that?
We don't know if they've spoken today, but it is fair to assume that they are in very constant, regular contact. And certainly after the death of the late Senator Lindsey Graham, I expect that they will have spoken in those recent days. And so, yes, it is fair to assume they've probably had a conversation, but it's unclear whether they've had one today. So we'll be asking about that.
And just quickly, Monica, is the president getting any, or has he gotten any kind of congressional pushback from this Saudi deal, considering the reporting indicates that really they wouldn't be beholden to, for instance, the same restrictions that the UAE faces with their civilian nuclear program?
Yeah, lawmakers are already raising that issue and are kind of pointing out the apparent or potential double standard here for why it is okay for the U.S. to enter into a deal with Saudi Arabia that would see them have a civil nuclear program when the U.S. is saying that they don't want that to happen in Iran, and certainly when the aim, according to the Trump administration, in part of the entire military conflict with Iran centers on the issue of them not pursuing a nuclear weapon. So that question was presented to the press secretary and to the White House, and they are saying that these are two different things, that they're not trying to compare, and that this would be a very different deal, again, if it does become reality, depending on this wrench now that's been thrown into it. But lawmakers it would require a really high bar for them to block it, Yasmin. It would go to Congress for approval, but it would need a veto-proof majority. So that is the important wrinkle there as well.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.